baffling. Like, hearing those numbers, it's crazy. I'm so thankful that this league is where we are right now, to still be a part of it and to see these things come to fruition. These players deserve it. They have been a part of a tidal wave of changing the landscape of the game. And I'm thankful that they are living in this moment, and I'm thankful that I'm still part of it.
Hello and welcome inside Fever Insider Live. My name is Brian Haenchen, joined by Peterson. We just finished up at the first day of Indiana Fever training camp. We appreciate everybody sticking around with us. We edited together the videos, put together our stories, got everything up online at IndyStar.com. You can see all that, and on the YouTube page, we'll be taking your comments, questions, whatever else you got, concerns in the live chat. We'll do our typical Q&A at the end of this thing. We have plenty of video to get to. Amber Cox, whom we talked to twice in 2 days. Stephanie White, Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark all talk today after training camp. And be sure, going to say this a lot, but be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Click the bell for notifications, like this video, all the things that help us get the numbers up. Chloe, let's start nice and broadly. We were talking about what's the lead for today. I didn't really have a conclusion, but I would love to hear what you thought the lead was.
Well, I think the lead is nobody's injured anymore. Ty Harris, obviously coming off of, I don't know why I started with Ty Harris, but coming off of a knee injury, only playing 5 games in Dallas last year. She had surgery in June. She's cleared now. Sophie Cunningham had surgery, MCL. She's cleared now. Both of those according to Amber Cox when we talked to her. Obviously, Caitlin Clark is cleared. She played in December. She played in March. She played actual games in March. So not much of a surprise that Caitlin Clark is cleared. She said she was 100% go. Aaliyah Boston, coming back from a lower leg injury that she suffered in Unrivaled. She is also ready to go as per both her and Amber Cox. So everybody's healthy, which the Fever are very happy about going into the season. That was something Caitlin mentioned today going into training camp last year. She was a little bit, she had that quad injury going into training camp last year. Obviously, it wasn't that big of a deal at the beginning of training camp, and then it became a bigger deal, but she wasn't 100% last year going into training camp. And that kind of just ballooned into, quad injury, second quad injury, left groin injury, right groin injury, ankle injury, all leading to, as you all probably know, her only playing 13 games last season. So she talked about how grateful she was today for being 100% healthy, being 100% going into camp this year. She also talked about managing reps in a sense that she knows now at the ripe age of 24, she said, that she does not need to take every single rep coming in training camp. When she first came to the Fever, she wanted to be in every single rep in training camp and practice, and anything she could do, she wanted to do it. But she's learning now, especially with, the injury she went through last year, that she doesn't need to take every single rep. It has nothing to do with her, her status, but she just doesn't need to take every single rep because she doesn't need to overdo it. It's not something, she needs to do anymore, and it's something she's learning that she just doesn't need to be at that spot anymore.
We actually have that sound right here. First clip of the season is Caitlin Clark talking about those reps.
Getting in practice and leading up to the season. Have you had those conversations about when to kind of dial it back throughout camp, especially going to 44 games this year?
I mean, we got 16 players here, I'm pretty sure. So, there's going to be a lot of opportunities, especially for the younger people. I know I'm only 24, but, I wanted to be in every single rep. So I think whether I'm in every single rep or I'm, sitting a rep out, like just being on the sidelines, helping them the best I can. It's not been a direct conversation of like, this is what you can do or can't do. I'm 100% cleared. I'm 100% go. Obviously you saw that at USA. I've been playing pickup as live as I can, playing live all the time. Eventually skill workouts get a little bit boring, so you just want to play and play and play. So I think it's just being smart. Like you don't need to overdo it at this point. But I think when I'm not in every single rep, I think it's a great leadership opportunity for me to help the younger people as well.
There was a follow-up question after that, again, about the reps. Caitlin kind of laughed it off, was like, guys, let's not make this like this whole thing. But it is going to be interesting to see how they kind of budget that energy, and not a ramping up thing. I've seen that float around with Caitlin Clark. This is by no means a ramp up thing. And for those who watched our interview with Amber Cox, which you can see on the IndyStar Fever TV YouTube page, she talked about how beneficial it was to get those minutes of FIBA, to see her playing, and just how excited she was to see her back out there. And talking to Caitlin, talking to the coaches, talking to Aaliyah Boston, it sounded like she kind of looked like herself, which you got to see as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. She had, I believe it was 17.12 assists, double-double in her first game with FIBA, or with Team USA for FIBA, down in Puerto Rico. And she obviously averaged about 20 minutes per game, as most players did on Team USA. And then she won MVP. So I think, there wasn't much of a learning curve for her kind of coming back from injury, but obviously when it came to Team USA, the qualifiers were one of those things where, no player is going to play 40 minutes. Every single player on that team averaged about 20 minutes per game, whether they started or not. So it was just, I think, a great ramp up period for her ahead of training camp, and obviously her senior national team debut.
You want to hear about her, kind of how she's taking care of her body and what she learned from last season? I know I sure do.
Stuff a little bit, and I'm the person that doesn't want to sit out a single rep. Like, I want to be in there every single time. Like, I just love competing and I love playing, and none of that has changed.
Is there anything else
I
we want
think
to talk
just,
about?
being a little bit smarter with my body and understanding what it takes. And I think
Not
especially
really.
like through camp days, like these days are really long. Like,
Someone
you're on
said
the court
they're
2.5, 3 hours and putting in a lot of stuff. So, taking care of my body at this point in the season is probably the most important thing. Whether that's recovery, whether that's pre-court treatment, whatever it is, I think it's those type of things. So, but like I said, I mean,
Do you
I've
want to see
never
the starred
really
ones or do you
sat on
want
the
to see
sidelines
the?
before, so it's
I
a very
wanna see the
humbling
live
experience,
ones.
and
Oh, we're not.
gives me a good perspective on how to be a great teammate and a great leader and show up every single day for them.
Caitlin Clark on how she's kind of what she learned from last season and just kind of budgeting herself and how she's approaching training camp this season. Let's move on. Obviously, the epic deal was something that we let off at the beginning. Aaliyah Boston's injury was a topic. Our friend Tony East asked directly, can you tell us the specificity and nature of your injury? And she did a beautiful, like a magnificent way of dancing around. For those who've seen the clip, it's on Twitter, it's on the YouTube, it's on IndyStar.com. She just described it as a lower body injury, which is very hockey coded, very nondescript, very vague, unless somebody takes a swipe at her leg, I suppose. But the good news is that she's fully healthy. Amber Cox, in an interview that did not air on our channel, she said that she's fully, yes, we are aware that we are not muted in the back. It normally does that automatically, but it doesn't do that because I'm on my iPad. Thankfully, we didn't say anything too incriminating. But no, the big news with Aaliyah Boston, I don't think we'll ever know exactly what the injury was, but the good news is that she's healthy. She's ready to go. And Chloe asked directly again to Amber Cox on Friday when we spoke before the epic deal was officially announced. 0 limitations, which is great news.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed, Amber Cox mentioned it was more of a precautionary thing that, Aaliyah Boston was pulled out of the FIBA qualifiers. Obviously, as she suffered the injury early March. I can't remember if it was late February, early March, in the last regular season unrivaled game. So I think, in the Fever's eyes, in Aaliyah Boston's eyes, it was one of those things where, they wanted to do that testing. They wanted to make sure she would be good to go. And obviously, the first few days of an injury are when, you have a lot of swelling, you have a lot of, the most issues, I would say. So I think that her not playing in FIBA was more of a precautionary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they just wanted to make sure that she would be ready to go for the FIBA season, and she is now.
Which is good and welcome news. You want to jump in, I guess? Anything you want to jump in on? Because we have the clips here. Anything you want to touch on, or just kind of freeform, maybe talk about what we saw during the workouts proper?
You can start it off. What you saw?
A lot of defense. The big focus, I think, on both when it was both the newcomers. I think it was the newcomers and the projected starters, or the people playing for starting spots, the returners. The focus was on physicality and defense. And obviously, Chloe and I were discussing this beforehand. We only get a limited amount of time to see practice, and it makes sense for them to kind of hide or shield the offensive stuff from us, lest they tip teams off. Defense, there's less room probably for that creativity. So we mostly saw defensive drills. There was a little bit of offensive work, but it was mostly defense. Anyway, focus on physicality, cutting through screens. That was a big one that they had everybody going through, and a lot of energy and intensity, which is to be expected. But even in just talking to the players that we spoke with and Stephanie White, that's kind of been the focus and the theme coming into camp this year's defense. I think Aaliyah said it, and I might have this clip in here, but they know they can score a lot of points. Now it's about stopping the other team from scoring with such regularity.
Yeah, and I mean, Stephanie White is a defensive coach. That's something she hung her hat on in Connecticut. I believe her 2 years in Connecticut, the Sun were number 2 and number 1 in defensive rating. So she talked about today, she wants to get to top 3 in defensive rating or points per 100 possessions. So that was an emphasis in free agency in the draft. Obviously, they picked up Ty Harris. She played with Stephanie White those 2 years in Connecticut. She knows what the expectation is when it comes to what, obviously, Stephanie White, the coaching staff that also included Austin Kelly, Bree January out in Connecticut want. And Bree January is the main defensive coach, position coach, or group coach, I should say. So they know Ty Harris knows those expectations, and they also obviously drafted Raven Johnson, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, as a guard, which only 3 guards in the last 10 years have won defensive or SEC Defensive Player of the Year. And Raven Johnson in these sets, she looked very good. She looked, like she did at South Carolina. She's a very ferocious defender, and she's going to bring that to the Fever.
It's a great thing to just have that balance. That's what they talked about. That's been kind of the theme, is flexibility at the guard position. And I'll play a clip here from Amber Cox talking about the reason why they have so many guards and that kind of that focus on defense.
Fortunate that Caitlin was able to get some gameplay and, very casually got back on the court and won the MVP at the qualifier. So happy for her. She's looked great. She's worked incredibly hard to be in a good spot from, the first day of training camp. But to your point, Sophie and Ty have not played in game action. So what we don't want to do is overload someone that is coming back from injury. We expect them to be, available and practicing, but there's a difference between, not playing games or playing games. And so, that factored into some of the decisions in terms of having some guard depth to make sure that we are allowing these players to really ramp up in an appropriate fashion. I think, one of the learnings from last year was we don't want to play players 40 minutes every night. This schedule is incredibly difficult. We have a few back-to-backs, and even when they aren't back-to-backs, we're playing every other day just about. So being able to create a rotation that does have some depth. We have a lot of versatility in this group. I'm really excited about that, so that we're fresh when we get to the playoffs. And, Kelsey Mitchell's wheels don't fall off this time. That's the goal. I think that was really a point of emphasis in this free agency to make sure that we were really smart about ensuring the health and well-being of our players throughout the course of the season.
Fever General Manager Amber Cox with Chloe and I on Fever Insider. You can watch that full interview in its entirety on the YouTube page. The word that she used was versatility through the depth that they have. Obviously, injury is a big part of that. I think, Chloe, when you asked that question, that's kind of how you framed it.
Yeah.
Was just the injuries and how that informed some of their decisions. But it's smart. It's better to have too many. And as we learned, everybody kind of learned last year, I don't know that there's really too much of a thing. Much of a thing is too much depth.
Yeah, I think one of the things Amber emphasized throughout our 20 minutes or so with her was versatility. And I think that's especially potent when it comes to guard depth. Like, obviously, I think I've mentioned this before, the Fever had 3 point guards last year. They had a lot of depth at point guard. All 3 of them got hurt. Obviously, Caitlin Clark was hurt. Ari McDonald and Sydney Colson got hurt in the same game, and both were then ruled out for the season. And then the Fever had to scramble to pick up Odyssey Sims. Kelsey Mitchell had to play point guard for a few games. So it's just one of those things where they're trying to make sure they have enough depth and they have versatility too, because obviously, you have Caitlin Clark, who primarily a point guard, but they want to get her some off the ball reps in order to kind of manage how tired she gets on the court. in a way. They want to keep her on the court as much as possible, but obviously when she's playing point, she's being double teamed, she's being guarded at 94 feet, and that can be very tiring if you're doing that every single possession. So playing Caitlin off the ball a little bit is, a way for the Fever to get her some rest while also keeping her on the court and keeping her as an X factor.
And off the ball doesn't necessarily mean that she's not going to get the ball later in the possession. Like it kind of feels like in reading some of the comments that it's like, it's all or nothing. And it doesn't work that way. Like there's ways to get her reps while still getting her minutes, like Chloe said.
Yeah.
Rest while keeping her on the floor. So that's why you move her off the ball. You give her a chance to get open in the corner. You shift the defense away from her and get her an open shot. Like, there's so many different ways to work her. And that's kind of the creativity that's coming in there. And somebody else too keeps talking about Raven Johnson's offense. Well, when you have Caitlin Clark, when you have Kelsey Mitchell, when you have the Lexi Hall that we saw in the second half of last season, when you have Sophie Cunningham, Aaliyah Boston, all these players who can score, you can afford to have a fifth player who's mostly there for her defense. And I think the scoring will come along as she goes, but it's not like you need her. It's not like the Fever really going to need her probably to score double-digit games. Like what she was doing in South Carolina might be sufficient with the offensive firepower this team has because of what she brings defensively. That's how I look at it, at least.
I agree. And I think, obviously, Raven Johnson is not going to be playing 20 minutes a game, I would guess. There's a learning curve in the coming into the WNBA, as there is with all rookies. And she's not going to be able to come in and just change the world right away. So I think it's just going to be, she's going to come in for those defensive intensity minutes, when the Fever are up 74-73 with 20 seconds left and they need to defend. That's where Raven Johnson will specialize, I think, at least in the beginning as she gets comfortable playing, in the WNBA. And I think kind of going back to that versatility, Ty Harris too, she is a point guard. She's a combo guard where she can play point, she can play off the ball. When she played with Stephanie White in 2024, she was their shooting guard. She played with Veronica Burton. She started, I think it was 39 of their 40 games. So I think what they were trying to do with at least the 1-2 spot was have a lot of that versatility. You have Kelsey Mitchell, who primarily plays the 2, Raven Johnson, who primarily plays the 1. And then obviously Caitlin Clark primarily plays the 1, but can take a couple possessions at the 2, and then kind of the opposite for Ty Harris. So I think that's what they were going for in that depth. And obviously they're bringing 8 guards into training camp. If you include the wings with, or not even if you include the wings, but they're bringing a lot of guards in the training camp. But I think that's also because, Sophie Cunningham hasn't played a game since her injury. Ty Harris hasn't played a game since her injury. So that's kind of a bit of a ramp up period for them. And I mean, it doesn't hurt, in my opinion, to have an influx of guards. I think the front court with, Aaliyah Boston, Mo Billings, Myesha Hines-Allen, Michaela Timpson, Damiris Dantas, that's pretty much set, in my opinion. I think where the cuts are going to come when it gets down to they're going to have to cut 2 players and then put one other player on the development squad along with Justine Passat. Those cuts are going to come from the guard room.
Yeah. Here's Stephanie White on the construction of the 2026 roster, and then also have a clip on Aaliyah Boston talking about the defense if we want it.
A bit different just because of our personnel. We have a little bit more size. I think we'll be able to do some more things on the defensive end of the floor. I think we'll hopefully be a better rebounding team as well. And that'll allow us to play a little bit more in transition. We were limited because of not just our personnel, but our numbers in terms of being able to pressure full court, being able to play with pace. I think we were like 5th in the league in pace, and we want to be in the top 2 or 3. So we want to play faster. We'll look and see what we have in combinations and what we can do in the quarter court. But I think more than anything, we want to be a bear on the defensive end of the floor. We want to be in the top 3 in the league in defense, and we want to play with more pace.
I think it's super important, that defensive mindset. Obviously, we know we can put points on the board. I mean, we have fast guards. We have great spacers, great shooters. Obviously, we have Caitlin at the point, so we know we can rack up points, but it's about getting stops.
Thank you, Chloe. Aaliyah Boston on the defense, Stephanie White on the makeup of this year's roster. Where do you want to go next?
I think I mentioned development players, and I think we got a lot of clarity on that from Amber Cox when we talked to her this past weekend. So I think that would be good. I mean, yeah.
Perfect
The
setup.
pool is truly there to develop those players. It's not meant to necessarily be a stopgap due to injury. So that's really nice. But I think, in our growing league, when you talk about, year in, year out, we've seen it. You have good, young, talented players not make rosters. And there just weren't enough roster spots. And now we've got these 2 development spots with 2 additional teams coming in the league, 3 more down the road. It just allows us to develop players. Again, this league is so elite in terms of the talent. It's hard sometimes for players coming directly from college to be able to step in and impact. And because we've only got 12 regular roster spots, we have to be really prepared for those injuries, right? Like we need the depth there for people who are ready to step on the court and play. So this gives us a great chance to, get people in our pipeline that we want to see grow and develop. And, again, just keep more people in the league, which ultimately is a fantastic thing.
Amber Cox on the role of the development players and how teams, including the Fever, are able to execute those. And I like it. Like, that's an exciting thing to hear about just from being around the team perspective.
Yeah, I think so too. Obviously, the Fever went through who knows how many injuries last year. I think by the time the season was over, it was 6 season-ending injuries if you include Demiris Dantas' concussion that, ultimately landed her out of the entirety of the playoffs. I think, obviously, as Amber Cox mentioned, it's not a stopgap for injury, but it will help in the way of, like, if they have Justine Passat on the development squad and, maybe Sophie Cunningham or Lexi Hull get injured, they have a player who is already in the Fever organization, who already knows the process, who already knows all of the plays, able to come in and play those games when, when they're recovering. And obviously it's a 12-game limit, but I believe there are roster exemptions still for injured players. Amber Cox obviously mentioned there will still be a replacement player thing going on this season, even with the 2 development squad players. So above all, it is developing. And I think it's great for players like Justine Passat, who Amber said she has a lot of potential, but it's just one of those things where it's the learning curve of the WNBA. Obviously, the play is faster. Everybody's bigger. Everybody is better. So having these 2 development spots will allow Passat to kind of learn that at a slower pace and still be able to be on a roster because, last year she would have just not made the 12-player roster and then she'd be cut and there would be no way for her to develop.
Should be really unfortunate because it seems like she has the potential to be a really good WNBA player. And that was kind of the issue with the league overall, was just all these good players are getting left off. We saw that with Odyssey Sims, and a lot of the players, Arian McDonald, a lot of these players that the Fever picked up over the course of last season out of necessity. It's like, damn, these players could have been here all along, but the money wasn't there, the rosters weren't there. So we're starting to see it. Roster or league expansion is going to help with that as well, to make the pool a little bit bigger for these players to play in. Again, if you want to send in your questions, mostly questions are preferred because that gives Chloe and I something to answer rather than address. Go ahead and do so now as we wind down the practice analysis part of our show. Trying to think, I feel like those were like the main takeaways. The Epic deal was obviously very cool. Aaliyah Boston, I asked her when it kind of all or how the process worked. It started around the time the CBA was agreed to, and then she left it all to her agent, just sat back and watched a good TV show while it all got sorted out, waiting for the call. So a very Aaliyah answer to that one. Caitlin Clark obviously super pumped. Stephanie White had some cool comments just on that you heard there at the beginning about the growth of the league and the fact that the Fever now have 2 $1 million players, just crazy to think about. Defense was a big focal point. The depth we've touched on. What you got?
I think something I've seen a lot of people mention is why the Fever put Justine Passat directly on the player development squad. And if you want to read about it in more depth, it is on IndyStar.com. But also, one of the kind of quirks of the player development squad is you need to be waived off of the standard roster and then clear waivers and then be put on the development squad. So I think something the Fever were worried about is, you know, Justine Passat, if they signed her to a standard contract throughout training camp, and then she ultimately, didn't make the 12-player roster, they would have needed to waive her. And then, one of the other 14 teams could have picked her up off of those waivers, and they were afraid of, somebody doing that. So they did this, as Amber Cox described to us, in order to protect her in a way and just make sure she is able to develop with the Fever going forward.
Yep. Here's one more video clip that I think is worth airing. It's just Stephanie White on the message of the team. This is something that Aaliyah talked about, or Caitlin, one of the two, talked about. And here's Stephanie White on that message.
Came a long time, and every first of all, you have to take it one day at a time. It doesn't matter. We can't talk about September, October if we don't take care of April or May. So we got to take it one step at a time. We know we've got a lot of new faces that we have to get into to how we want to play, and we got to make sure we're building our chemistry, building our camaraderie. And the other thing is, it's hard, man. We're better, but everybody's better. It's hard. This league is hard, and so you just have to take it one game at a time. We got to put first things first.
There you go, Stephanie White on the message to the team and how they're approaching things here coming into team training camp. Let's get to some of the questions. Was there anything else you want to get to? I apologize before we get into some questions. Okay, let's get into some questions. Hurry up. Sorry, Natasha. I just thought that was really funny. You're welcome. I enjoyed that as I pulled up the chat for the first time after sending in. We appreciate everybody and their excitement for the show. My favorite Stephanie White quote from today: "We want to play faster. We are 5th in the league in pace and want to be top 3. Hello." That was something that stood out to me. It kind of got buried under some of the other developments, but we should probably address that. Stephanie White said they want to play faster even than they did last year. Yeah. And last year, obviously injuries played a big role, and I think she addressed that, and they couldn't play the way that they wanted to. But this year, full strength. She wants to go. She's shooting for the stars with defense and offense.
Yeah, I think so too. Obviously, the chaos of the injuries last year. Caitlin Clark is probably the fastest point guard in the league in terms of trying to play with pace, and there's not very many backups or other players that can match it. Obviously Ari McDonald did a pretty good job before she was injured, but Sydney Colson last year, she was more of a traditional walk the ball off half court point guard, and so was Odyssey Sims, so there wasn't as much transition, and that was kind of something they just needed to adapt to with how many injuries they had, and just getting someone in to be able to fill the spot. So I think this year, with having a healthy roster, they should be able to kind of push that pace. And I think Mo Billings was a great signing for that pace. She showed a lot of it, in Unrivaled with Kelsey Mitchell, at the FIBA World Cup qualifiers with Caitlin Clark. So they brought in people who are able to play with that same pace.
Do you know if their starting 5 is set? Any idea? The big question is Sophie or Lexi, correct?
I think so. Obviously, you have Caitlin Clark at the 1, Kelsey Mitchell at the 2, Aaliyah Boston at the 5. The general thought is Mo Billings at the 4. And I think, obviously, as you mentioned, the biggest question is Sophie Cunningham or Lexi Hull at the 3. I think it could go either way. Obviously, Lexi started at the beginning of the 2025 season when Sophie Cunningham had her ankle injury, and then Sophie took that starting spot over a little bit after she returned, and then obviously she got injured again, and Lexi took the spot over again. So I think that's the biggest spot that has a question mark. But obviously 2 players, both returners, both very experienced. I don't think they could go wrong either way.
I've seen this question from a few different people. They have an international scouting department.
They do.
Amber Cox, I think it was in our first interview with her, she mentioned the fact that they were scouting internationally. Mm-hmm. They keep those players in mind. There's also a lot of talented players in the United States. I feel like that's what was it? Odyssey Sims, maybe, whom they saw play overseas, or one of the other signings at the point last year. International scouting again became a topic where they talked about finding some of these players from overseas. And at that point, I think fans were upset that they were going overseas for players, so you can't really win. But yes, there is an international scouting department.
Yes, there is.
Will they have practice every day until the first game of preseason? I'll let you handle the scheduling and
Yes, they
logistics.
will. Every day something new for the Fever this season, which is atypical from most other teams, is they are having media access and you know, practice access at the beginning of practice rather than the end. So that's why it was a lot earlier this morning than usual.
That's your Chloe
So-
chagrin.
So I don't like waking up early, but I will do it. But yeah, so usually it will open at the beginning of practice, which is around 10-ish, give or take, depending on the day. Obviously, that will change as the season goes on, and they change up practice schedules based on what games they're playing that week. But, you know, that's different from last year and obviously different from most teams.
Any impressions about MHA? Watch some impressive highlights on her.
We didn't see too much, I would say, today specifically, because they, at the beginning of practice, they split into two stations or two groups, and the group that Maisha Hines-Allen was in went downstairs for a while for the first probably 15 minutes or 15, 20 minutes of open practice. So we didn't see much of, Maisha Hines-Allen or of really any of the starters other than those couple defensive sets we saw. So not too much for today, hoping to see some more of her this week.
Interview with Raven soon. I would say for show purposes, hopefully, ideally. I mean, we'd like to
A girl
start.
can dream.
Yeah, we're going to start trying to rotate in some players and do like what we did with Amber Cox, where we pre-record some interviews, post them on this site for you guys, and it's beneficial for Chloe and I too. And I think for the players, it's a chance to kind of get to know them on a different way, a different angle than what you just see in the videos online and in social media, because obviously it's a little easier to talk when it's just a one-on-one or two-on-one versus an entire scrum on
In
one.
terms of practice, hopefully sometime in the next couple days.
Yeah. Also have John Nolan on the list, and a few others. Chloe and I are cooking in terms of guest ideas that we'd like to bring on for this season. Are the Fever going to hold a team press conference like some of the other teams have done? There's media day on Wednesday where we'll talk to everybody, but I think that'll basically just be your de facto introductory press conferences. You have to remember this season, guys, everything is happening so quick. It's basically like you're trying to get them in here and ready for camp. There's not really that time, at least on the Fever side. I know some other teams did it, but for the Fever, wasn't really a ton of time necessarily to get everybody in, and press conferences, I think the focus is more on the basketball operations side of things, as it probably should be. Media day is Wednesday, just to clarify that comment. Are you paid by Fever Management? No, and that's kind of
You're
stupid.
paid by the Indianapolis Star.
New here, this might not seem super relevant, but is Caitlin Clark wearing her new signature shoe in preseason or at opening night? I have not heard anything. Have you?
I have not. I believe she was wearing Kobe's today. But nothing about her new shoe.
Let's see here. I enjoyed this one. The presser was so positive, and yet here we are. But apparently they were all just kidding. Yep, it's Chloe's and my mentions in the chat here. It seems to skew a little negative, I would say. Let's see. I'm not sure, but will the preseason games be televised or any live stream? We've got this question a couple times. Have you heard anything on that side of things, Chloe?
I have not. I imagine it'll be streamed somewhere.
Yeah, let's see.
I think, if it's not on over-the-air TV, it is usually on League Pass, WNBA's paid, service. They always have, the Fever, at least, always have radio, John Nolan.
Hi.
So, if all else, there will be radio.
Which is good. That's all you really need, honestly, is the radio. Let's see. Is there anything else that we need to get to? We'll do one last call for questions. Give everybody 2 minutes to get questions in while Chloe and I talk about the week ahead. Fever practice every day up until Saturday, when you're going to be in New York.
Yes.
New York for the preseason
New York.
opener.
Yeah, they'll have media day on Wednesday. So regular practice tomorrow, media day on Wednesday, practice Thursday, Friday, game on Saturday, and then they're off on Sunday.
In the event that we don't do a show before the preseason game, I assume we'll probably do one at some point in the middle of the week. But
yeah,
what are you going to most be focused on when you're sitting there in New York watching that game on Saturday?
I'll just be interested to see how, Mo Billings, Maisha Hines-Allen, kind of fit in. Those are the two, I would say, biggest signings, or that kind of will have the biggest impact in the rotation. Obviously the other 4 projected starters are returners. So, with Mo Billings coming in, seeing how she will be able to play. Obviously we saw a little bit of that at FIBA, but kind of just seeing it in a larger form. And then obviously kind of Ty Harris, Raven Johnson, how that defensive, set works. And yeah.
See, how did the chemistry feel? Do we know when they may start scrimmaging together? I want to see some of them players play together. Chemistry side of things, I saw the video that the Fever posted yesterday of everybody coming back, and it was like a big happy reunion, which is always great to see. Chemistry-wise, it's kind of hard to tell from the drills that we see, but I mean, it was energetic for what
it's very energetic, and I think we don't necessarily know when they'll start scrimmaging. I think a lot of it is, they pick and choose, or the coaching staff picks and chooses what they want the media to see. They were running these defensive sets today, likely because they didn't want to show off any of their offensive plays. And I think that will be the case at least until, the preseason game when we see some of those offensive sets. And I think, they're very intentional on what they want media to see and what will then obviously go on social media, or like what clips will go on social media. So I think scrimmaging is not something we will necessarily see this week, or at least until after preseason game.
That's an interesting one. Will Michaela Timpson get minutes? And I would take that a step further for you, Chloe, and just how does she kind of fit into this rotation as things stand now?
I think the front court, I think she could get, some minimal minutes in the front court at the 3 or the 4. I think it all depends on, you have Aaliyah Boston, obviously, just a bruiser in the front court. You have Demira Santos backing her up. Then you have Mo Billings, Maisha Hines-Allen. So she's not really in the too deep of any of them. So I don't see her, at least at the beginning of the season, with everybody healthy, getting the most minutes. I think things will change if, obviously, Demira Santos is not at Fever Camp. She is, she's waiting on her visa. So I think if those visa issues persist, I think back to when Nika Mule couldn't get her visa approved until who knows when, like 3 weeks into the season. Obviously, we'd see more minutes with Timpson in the front court. And I think I saw another question of any thoughts on KK moving to developmental. I think that's an interesting thought, but they obviously have to go through, if they waive her, she has to go on the waiver wire. And then any of the other teams could pick her up before they are able to assign her to the developmental pool. So I think they're kind of in a tough spot with that, considering the developmental pool did not exist until this year. I think if the developmental pool existed last year, that would have been a great spot for her, but it obviously, now they're kind of in a hard spot where she's already on her rookie scale contract. And if they want to put her on the developmental pool, they will have to put her on waivers. And I think she would be a good pickup on waivers for someone else on a rookie contract.
Yep. I think that's it. Chloe and I will probably be back at some point here in the next few days. We'll both be at camp tomorrow, the two of us plus Josh Heron on Tuesday, all three of us again on Wednesday for media day. Thursday and Friday will be Chloe and Josh, and Chloe's going to be your Sherpa out in New York on Saturday, off day Sunday, and then we're back at it again the next week. Thank you guys again so much for watching. The numbers in return on this channel here in the first few days of existence have been absolutely phenomenal. I think I speak for both Chloe and I that we appreciate everybody's interest and engagement with all this stuff. Obviously, we really enjoy doing this show. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. Make sure to read both of our stories on IndyStar.com. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. And we will talk to you again here in a couple days. Take care.